Good evening again. This is Dolores Cannon, again with the Metaphysical Hour. And tonight we're live. I know when I'm gone, they pick the shows out of the archives. And last week I had a conference in Chicago, so it was out of the archives. But I'm back on tonight and next week, and then I go out of the country again. But I do like to let people know when it is a live show. So if you do want to call in tonight, we can take calls. The toll-free number is 877-876-5227. 877-876-5227 if you want to call in. I've got a very special guest tonight. It's Dr. J.J. Hurtak and his wife Desiree are on the line. And I think that a lot of the people out there who are really involved in metaphysics do know who Dr. Hurtak is. He was a groundbreaker. It was way back in the 70s when he wrote the Keys of Enoch. And what I've been hearing, though, is the Keys of Enoch it was way before its time, but it was something that was revolutionary at the time and started a whole new way of thinking. But it's still out there, and it's still being translated and published all over the world. JJ, you said it's now in 12 languages?
That's right. It'll be coming out in the Japanese language very, very soon. We're privileged to say it's in the Hebrew language, the Finnish language, the
Hungarian language.
Hungarian, Norwegian, I think it can go on, but for all intents and purposes, it's a language of a language, what we call the language of light, in the sense that it works with a type of symbolic language that brings out both sides of the inner mind, the male and the female. The female is multidimensional, the male is more strictly scientific and linear, but the Keys of Enoch force the mind into transformation. It forces a violation of structure or traditional language.
Well, you know, Dolores, this all started when Dr. Hurtak had an experience in the early 1970s.
I wanted you to go back to the beginning. I always like to do that.
Right.
Tell me first, what was your life, what were you doing before all of these things happened? Let's start back there. What were you doing when you were normal, I guess we would say?
Right. In the pre-higher consciousness experience state, I was a young professor in both anthropology and Oriental philosophy and studies, both at the State University of California, as well as working with the art institute called California Institute of the Arts, and training young specialists in groundbreaking film studies.
And, you know, I was one of his students, actually, at the time, so I can tell you that really made a difference in terms of when he had his experience from what he was teaching prior to that.
That's because some of the students were able to actually film the events that took place.
Yeah. You know, when you got together then.
Yeah, but what was going on in terms of his experience itself, of course, was where he saw this being who came to him in a room in the evening and literally took him physically off the planet. So all his people who were around him actually didn't see him for about 2 days. And when he came back, he actually was able to teach some of this information to the students. And it was really quite shocking in the 70s, although with all the light phenomena and other things that were happening around him, many of his students really saw these events and understood what was taking place. And they work with whole light beings, and many of us saw whole light beings at the time, and other types of light phenomena in the room and even at night.
More importantly, this was documented by young students of film who actually saw light discharged from my body after my higher dimensional experience. So this was not something that was simply interdimensional. It was also in the physical reality of being able to be documented quite thoroughly. And then I met behind the scenes with people who were involved in the space program, people who were leading experts in parapsychology, metaphysical research, and those who were aware that these types of events could take place with higher intelligence under the right circumstance.
Yeah, that was one thing. You said you always want to make clear. It's not a channeled book. It was actually these beings giving you this information.
You're in face-to-face experience, not something that would come indirectly or subjectively through some unknown source where automatic writing or something would be notated, but an actual experience where actual mathematical formulas, genetic codes, and specific information regarding things in our local cosmos that would be discovered that took place off the planet in a higher state of where I was through biolocation.
And you're right that it is ahead of its time, because the whole purpose of the experience was to give him information for the coming years, and it really was to cover 54 to 64 areas of science, from the astrophysical to the genetic, talking about cloning back in the 70s, talking about discoveries in the pyramids. These are things that people weren't really that much aware of, and many people now, as you say, are getting very interested again because you can see these realities taking place.
But when this happened, though, they came into your room physically, you said.
That's right. I was deeply in prayer and using certain music ciphers or mantric sound patterns in combination, and the morphogenic door was triggered through which light was manifested, through which a higher dimensional experience took place in a matter of seconds. And as a result of this, of course, I published the book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch, which is now in a new edition with the color plates available. So those who are interested, please go to our international website, www.keysofenoch.org, and acquire the new edition that has all of the illustrations in color. Originally, we're not able to afford to put all of the information out in color codes, but now that has taken place, and the book has so much energy, even from these remarkable color plates.
Well, you know, in my work, I've found out about beings of light. You think they were more beings of light than they were actual physical entities?
Well, they were definitely, he calls them whole light beings in the Keys of Enoch, and of course, the entity himself was Enoch, and then when he was taken outside of this reality, he also encountered Metatron and other Lords of Light. And that's the whole cosmology behind the Keys of Enoch, that there are these many levels of intelligence, and I know you talk about them, as you mentioned, that this universe is just one small part of a vast hierarchical level of higher intelligence. And you have extraterrestrial levels of intelligence, you have what we call the local midwayers, and then you have what we often call the Lords of Light. So these many multiple levels of intelligence, and yes, he was taken into and through these various dimensions to see some of the highest levels of the universe and the greater galaxies. And
I think it's amazing that we are getting the same information. We're getting it just from different sources. But I always think if it's repeated, then it adds validity to it. Because it
That's
is,
right.
You know,
and
but we know we're getting something that's accurate.
Well, the whole light beings are those who are basically have a corpus or physical body that is of pure light. In other words, they have quantum mechanical corpuscles of light, to use a word of contemporary science. Mm-hmm. They pulsate with a different type of energy that is not physical, that is to say, defined in three-dimensionality. They're multidimensional, and they're capable of manifesting in manifesting in the fraction of a second. Now, as a result of my remarkable experience, I wrote in one of the Keys of Enoch, and I would ask just a few seconds I could say, as I quote Key 313, verse 15, the following: the direct relationship between the size of the universe, the diameter of the proton, and man's or our range of vision is part of a larger mass energy space-time transformation, which involves changes in our basic concept of the known universe. So the Keys of Enoch are basically a new cosmology of consciousness, pulling together everything from the smallest subatomic particle units to the largest galactic and quasi-galactic creation, showing us that there is an interconnectedness with all life, that we are not separated from the living universe any more than the living source, the divine hierarchy or divine Godhead that creates and recreates continuously.
In fact, it talks about how we ourselves have higher light bodies, and we currently are just focused on our physical body, but we actually have an overself body which functions in terms of having a higher consciousness reality and can tap into these greater realms if we were only just more aware of them.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're just focused on our physical. We don't really know the totality of what's really out there. But I can see why they chose you, because you're a scientist. Do you think that's why?
Well, I feel it was more of a question of having both the training in the spiritual philosophies. I'm speaking now of all major philosophies, as well as a little bit of the scientific. So my mind was sort of preset or programmed to accept information on both hemispheric lobes, or both sides. So I was really prepared to see the interconnectedness of how we cannot separate the scientific from the spiritual, nor the spiritual from the scientific. It's the holistic imprint of life that's so valuable that we're moving into. We are going into what I believe an accelerated evolutionary change that will bring about this great synthesis, where we will learn to use those inner powers of the mind to utilize the great spiritual gifts and visions that are latent in all individuals, as well as to scientifically go beyond the three-dimensionality of life and realize that we're in a fantastic cosmos of living form. We're not the only evolution. There are other life forms. As a result, scientifically, we'll be able to prove the existence of a cosmic divine experience.
And so the essence of the whole Keys of Enoch is to show us that we are going through these changes and we are being prepared to take the next quantum leap. And the information from the keys, and there's specific scientific information, as you mentioned, shows us that in all the areas of science that we were actually given information to speed up our consciousness, to speed up our whole evolution, so we would be prepared for the changes that are in front of us.
Yeah, that's what's happening now. It's what I lecture on, too. The physical body is changing. Everything is in a state of flux. But it is affecting a lot of people, and they don't understand why. We're moving into the whole new earth, the whole new dimension here.
For instance, the magnetic fields are changing. I'm sure you talk about that as well. And the research that we've investigated with Russian scientists have shown that actually when the magnetic field changes of the Earth, that perhaps we become more sensitized. And that can be very chaotic for many individuals when the norm changes, so to speak. But actually for those who are more spiritual, you can actually start reaching up into higher levels of intelligence and making that divine interconnection.
A lot of people are very confused because they don't understand what is happening. But
I think this is the reason why we need more spiritual cosmology, why we need to recognize, in addition to teaching, there's a whole vibration aspect of living experience. And with the Keys of Enoch is also the inner teaching. The keys are musical keys or thresholds we can activate within ourselves. And we provide through the Academy for Future Science a plethora of music documents and cassettes and CDs that people can acquire and listen to and build, as it were, a whole harmonic within themselves. So there's daily activation of the cells. There's the repair of the energy field within the body. There's a whole energy oneness that can come out of this. With my late colleague Alice Coltrane, the famous music composer, said was the quest for the super soul. We begin to activate other powers that are latent within us that are consistent with the music of the spheres, the background energy of the universe pulsating and giving the life force that is so important for all aspects of life to go forth.
And of course we feel all life is vibration, and so with the sounds, with the music, with the higher vibratory frequencies, we can actually prepare our consciousness mind and heal our physical body at the same time.
Yes, this is what a lot of healing is being done with sound and color. And of course the people in Atlantis also knew how to use these things. So I do believe in the power of sound to heal and to do a lot more in the body than people realize.
But the reason it really works, of course, is that we don't think we came from the ooze of the earth. We feel we came from a light structure, a light vibratory
yes,
structure.
I've written about that in my last book, The God Source. That's what it is light.
Well, your work is so important, and we thank you for highlighting this, because many people think we're earthbound and we're simply the only evolutionary force in the universe. They forget that our essential reality is from the higher corpus design of the living light that manifests itself in a variety of ways, one of which has been the human Adamic creation. We're beginning to reach that new threshold where we're seeing the old paradigms come apart. We're seeing issues go in circles, and people, I believe, out of this burst in the economic bubble, are going to seek more God-given directions of how they can raise their consciousness and see the real liberation to be from the material force to that of the universal energy that is behind all creation.
See, that's what I've written about in my book. They said it's the greatest test, and they greatly admire human beings because they're one of the few species that come in forgetting everything and forgetting where they came from. And the big test is to discover it again and be able to go back and find it out on your own. And they admire us for doing that.
Right, and we feel we have that coding within us, and with the sacred names, with the higher music, with the divine wisdom that fortunately has been here throughout the centuries, we can start to find our own original identity. And of course, as I know you also talk about, that our identity is really with the stars, and we also even go beyond that. Our identity is really with the higher lords of light.
Yes, and this can't be activated, and it is being activated now within the cellular structure.
Well, that's it, Doris. It's not simply abstract ideas or words or cliches or axioms, but it's the realization that the ordinary reality we perceive is not one universe, but a harmony of phases and movements of indefinite number of universes through which we rediscover our multidimensionality, through which we rediscover our power of consciousness to reach out, the healing power, the seeing power, the whole ability to restructure our genetic code, the fantastic ability to reach out through higher thought forms of communication to actually work with other life forms in the greater universe, the living nature of the God. All of these exciting aspects of what the ancients called the tree of life are at our fingertips if we move beyond traditional language and science into a living drama of what this really means through transformation.
And Dr. Hurtak mentioned the DNA, and the Keys of Enoch back in the 70s talked about how the DNA itself is based on a God code, and the frequencies of what we consider the divine name of the Yod, the He, and the Vav, which is three letters that rotate and change, just like the DNA uses three letters to code for all the amino acids in our system.
And many popular writers have come out with the God code or their take on this, but essentially if you put them into the spotlight, they will go back and say that the research of Dr. Hurtak with the decoding mechanism of the divine name does illustrate the different categories and permutations which are reflected in the way the nucleotides, the basic building blocks of life, work according to a whole new genetic order, which is new for us but not in the overall sense of what is there in eternity, that we are but one definition of an ongoing life force that is remaking and transforming itself continually. So we can say God's creation is formation and transformation, endless recreation through the human subject. And so we have this great opportunity now of co-evolution and co-direction of the life force to really move out of the old paradigms of despair, of attachment, of material chaos into a higher structure, what it means to have a living cosmology of consciousness.
And what's exciting is scientists are starting to see this. They see in the whole universe how life unfolds, whether it's the subatomic particles. They're right now in Switzerland looking for the Higgs boson, which they call the God particle, because they know that the whole universe is entangled, is interconnected. And so, it's only a matter for us to wake up and realize that we are part of that whole greater universe. And we've been working a lot, of course, with the consciousness knowledge and the idea of remote viewing, of why we can tap into people on the other side of the planet, why we can send them love, higher energy, and healing power just by our thoughts.
Yeah, that's one thing I lecture on, too. We can make a difference with our thoughts.
Dolores, I wanted to ask you a question. Did you ever run into or know in any depth the work of Harold Sherman down in your part of the country?
Oh, well, yeah, Harold Sherman was from this part of the world.
That's the reason I'm asking you.
I think he's died now, but...
He died a few years ago. He was a very close friend of mine, and we were a part of an experiment some years ago with off-planetary remote viewing, and he and I participated in looking at what we believe to be interesting landforms on the surface of the planet Mars.
Okay.
Harold Sherman was also one of the human targets for astronaut Mitchell when he was off-planet in the Apollo mission. He was able to transmit very specific signals back, and Harold told me that he was very, very happy that he, as a sensitive, would be able to pick up on these signals and these specific codes that were sent back really across space. And because this illustrates what we were working on also with colleagues at Stanford Research Institute back in the early 70s, airless performance of information across stellar distances and literally against all odds of mathematical negativity, we're able to show the perfection of mind over matter in terms of non-local targets.
And this might be metaphysical.
I remember when that happened. I never met Harold Sherman, but I do know of his work, and he's like a pioneer. He goes way back. But you mentioned about Mars. Do you want to talk about that? Because in my work, I know there is life, but what I have found is that there are still some beings, but they are living beneath the surface.
Well, we agree that on many of the planets that people or intelligences simply live a subsurface, and that's why people confuse even this planet. They think that there's a hollow Earth, but many of the moons supposedly around Mars are also perhaps also hollow, and so. But we also feel that people live also in spaceships that are.
But to answer your question specifically, the keys of Enoch tell us that there were grids of energy, maser-like patterns on Mars at one time, and NASA scientists found out specifically that there was a living maser activity on the surface of Mars. We're not going out as far as you're asserting that there was a subsurface civilization, but the landforms there in the Elysium Quadrangle, which I published in my book in '73, do illustrate the fact that there are very interesting structures that appear to be non-natural, deserving a second look by those involved in the various space programs. And I would assert that at one time, when Mars had a different atmosphere millions of years ago, before the planet lost its atmosphere, there were conditions similar to our planet that may have allowed some type of biohabitat to exist for extrasolar intelligence that would be briefly on the surface.
That they had a remarkable civilization, but yes, the atmosphere was destroyed, and that was what the remainder of the race did go beneath the surface, and other ones just went in ships, and some of them came to Earth, they went to other planets. That's what I found.
I do know when I was working with the Russians a few years ago, their loss of the Phobos 2 spacecraft from their side was claimed to have been some type of technical accident, but the film documents I saw showed that there was an interception that took place, clearly indicating there was another life force there.
Yes, in fact, the Phobos 2 shadow phenomena right before the very last scene before the Phobos spacecraft was lost to radar and to communications is on our website, keysofenoch.org. But also we've worked with shamans in Africa who feel that they themselves have come from Mars. And the pictures in the Keys of Enoch are actually of pyramids on Mars, not just the face form. But we believe that there really was a civilization. But as you said, I mean, many of those intelligences were able to get off and travel because they're part of a whole cosmic galactic intelligence that exists throughout the universe. And it's only us. We're one of the few species that are so advanced that are now beginning to take our baby steps to perhaps also join them in space in the near future.
Yeah, that's the plan, is that we will join them, but they said first we have to get rid of our violence, because they're really afraid of us with our violence.
I think it's been clear, and it's been suggested, I know at various symposia that I've been at, that the problems of the Russian and American probes to Mars may have been a result of what we will call dual-use technologies, which mean in addition to geophysical applications, there were military applications. But we're also saying that that Mars was part of a larger biosphere with Mother Earth at one time, and that there was an exchange. If we look at the world cultures and legends all over the place, there is a consistency that suggests there was a exchange between an evolutionary intelligence from that part of our local life system with that form of intelligence here upon Mother Earth. So all things up for grabs. And I don't want to sound too far out by simply saying that life does exist on Mars in the present tense. We're looking for microbiological life forms, and I think our great experts like Chris McKay at NASA, Ames, and others, Michael Malin would be very happy just to find those small microbial forms, either in the fossilized form. I think it's too early to make these assertions until we have more and more of real honest-to-goodness data, which is coming in at this time.
But even the fact that water clearly at one point existed on Mars throughout the surface, in fact, the NASA engineers have made a map of what Mars looked like, millions of years ago, and it actually was full of water with only one or two continents above the surface of the water. So, of course, if we have life here, people are starting to understand in 14 billion light years around our whole universe that we know must be millions and millions of different types of intelligence existing throughout, and we're just starting to discover that we're one species amongst many others in intelligence in the universe.
I was going to ask you about the water, because I've also heard that was one way of knowing there did have a fertile planet at one time, because water did exist there.
Yes, they've recognized through the work of John Brandenburg and others like him that there was once a type of proto-ocean on the Martian surface. But taking this from space back to the home of Mother Earth, I think we need to look at the evidence being presented by major programs such as Project Disclosure by various governments of the world that higher intelligence is much closer to us than on the surface of Mars. Our military weapon centers have been buzzed for many, many years. We know, of course, that there are biological and metallurgical specimens claimed by specialists in various governments. And my interest, I'm sure yours is also, with Desiree, to look at the implications now coming up in the next 2 or 3 years of what this means to have the British authorities, along with the French, the Brazilians, the Japanese, come forth and simply say that this is really a living, dynamic universe with many life forms, some of which are interested in the human question of whether or not there's intelligent life on Mother Earth, or whether we're going to go forward with tribal warfare, overlooking, as it were, the clues in our ancient myths and legends that we were never alone and that we will ultimately meet with our cosmic cousins. So this is, to me, a very exciting time to live, and I think the great discoveries that are being made in space, as well as under the oceans, show us that wherever we look with the telescope, wherever we look with the surface probes, we are finding the triggering mechanisms of life. And the whole illusion of death or finality or singular evolution is something that we must step beyond. This is why the Keys of Enoch is so important, why we encourage those who hear this program to order this, because it's the only book that points out, before the discoveries of what was found in Indonesia on the island of Flores, specifically that there would be a higher form of proto-evolution. And that was made in 2003.
Right. These are these little hobbits, which are about 1 meter or 3 feet tall, and they consider it an entirely different species. So we know that there was the Neanderthals on the planet, which were supposedly not really connected to us. Now we find out that there was this other little hobbit species called Homo florensis that was existing on this island. So here's 3 species on one little planet. You know, what do you think exists in outer space? There must be really thousands.
There was also records of giants, too.
Also the giants. We've looked at some of the giant footprints in different places, and also some of the legends, especially in Japan.
So the Keys of Enoch, in one key known as Key 215, give us specific places for the giants in terms of the longitude of 31 degrees 9 minutes east, and the hobbits, or the small people, in Indonesia at 121 degrees 27 minutes east. No other textbook published in the 70s has specifics on the giants as well as the midgets or the mini proto-humans on the same page. And so this is, again, a very important challenge to students of anthropology and archaeology, is that there is a plan in the book, The Keys of Enoch, that give us keys to our past, the other evolutionary experiences and experiments that we are now finding clues to prepare us to accept, as it were, the reality that we live in a very dynamic, pluralistic universe, and we must be prepared to meet with our cosmic friends, be they of the giant Buddha-like size of these huge statues you find in India and China, or these small miniaturized beings you find in Indonesia and the islands of the Pacific.
And Dolores, some of our research, as you can hear, is from archaeological studies that we've made. We've been to Egypt, and we've worked with the Tomb of Osiris. But one of the most interesting things, of course, is what's happened with the New World. And there's interesting sites both in Brazil and in the Carolinas that show that man was here about 50,000 years ago. And that, of course, puts a real monkey wrench in everyone's educational plan that, you know, we only came about 12,000 years ago, perhaps over the Bering Straits.
So that's what goes back in my books, too. That's why I'm always glad when we can find scientific evidence to back up the things that we're writing about. You know, I just put it out there on faith alone. Here it is. You can take it or leave it. But it's always good to have scientific evidence to back it up.
Well, the whole basis of the keys shows that these intelligences, really the higher intelligence that are helping us at this time, have given us clues and insights, as to where to find some of these hidden records, this hidden information, so that we can be prepared. We can know that cycles had taken place in the past. We can know that civilization existed, and we can figure out how even the pyramid ultimately we believe will be understood, how it was built, so we can have a better energy technology.
And of course, Desiree, speaking of the Great Pyramid, not the pyramids in Yucatan or under the waters of Japan and Yonaguni, where we've also visited, and all of these locations are also pointed out in terms of the cosmic map or longitudinal grid in Key 215 that speaks of previous contact that we've had with the higher worlds, and how there's an order of teachers known as the Order of Melchizedek or Melchizedek that had the opportunity in the wisdom tradition to see this information deep within the consciousness of the human race, so that all parts of humanity would have an opportunity to see the interconnectedness of the 12 planetary divisions of the human race.
Mm-hmm. But you know, one thing I've heard, though, that the Keys of Enoch is written in a very difficult language to read. You want to comment on that?
That's why it goes with music, and with the use of music, then you understand the interconnectedness of how vibration is necessary to work with a higher language.
Well, in some cases, it's also an experiential language. So some people have to have like a little bit of an experiential ability to be able to read between the lines. It's not just the intellectual reading. But I think also what people are finding is, as you said, maybe some of those people read it in the 70s and the 80s and they didn't understand what they were, reading. But now when we talk about the Great Pyramid, when we talk about the mummies in China, when we point to certain aspects of Orion and the Pleiades, people know about these things. They've heard about it, they've read about it, and some people have actually even experienced these.
So people have caught up with what we wrote about 35 years ago. I think another part of the story is to recognize that we do have what we call an exposition series of teachings available on CD format that goes into the nuances of language, explains the vocabulary, goes into the musical patterns, all of which is part of what I will call of the opening of the inner resource of being able to think in the language of light, or to be able to think with transformational linguistics, where you're not stuck in traditional language patterns of this or that. We would call this dualistic logic, which leads simply into a type of foggy fertility where the mind begins to see but not really experience the higher realities behind language. So, again, the challenge is out there for all of you hearing the program. The new edition with color plates is available along with the exposition series, along with the music, and along with special videos that have won many international awards for the tremendous computer graphics that have shown how the mind thinks not so much in linear logic, but it thinks in multidimensional experiences of color flashes, of vast layerings of information coded into each part of the body, mind, and spirit.
And, of course, the keys are quite popular, but we've written other books as well and done commentaries. So
I didn't know if we was going to have time to ask about those or not, but I'm interested in all of them. But let's switch a little bit to global warming. I know that's also a great interest of yours, isn't it?
Exactly, and Desiree and I have worked on many international levels. We were present as participants at the UN Summit on Sustainable Development in South Africa. We were also present for the Summit on Climate Change, or the high-level meeting Climate Change, last year in New York at the UN, looking at the strategies of water purification, what we could do with situations that would be very serious with the temperatures changing in the ocean, the tropical air conversion studies becoming very more pessimistic in terms of what we are going to look at in terms of oceanic dynamics, and the whole process of greenhouse gases dropping in temperature gradients. And so we have a very serious situation. In fact, John Gormley from Ireland specifically told many of the government leaders that were assembled last September in New York, we had basically 10 years really to curb the problem with the greenhouses. Otherwise, we would see the demise of many, many species on Mother Earth.
That's pretty short. Only
10 statements shook the audience in its boots. But
the changes have actually really shocked scientists and government leaders. When you look at now the North Pole, of how the ice is melting so significantly that you can...
And Greenland, too. Look at Greenland.
Exactly. And they think that even in 25 to 50 years the minimum, they'll be able to run ships across, and there maybe will be no ice whatsoever at the North Pole in the summertime.
The melting of the polar areas in the north is rapidly moving 5 times more quickly than the original paradigms put forth many years ago, but the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has given we're very precise schematics and graphics as to the overall consequence of what this will mean, in addition to the rising of the oceans causing the need to relocate vast populations in the Pacific Ocean area. We will have a erosion of the coastal areas for food production. We're going to have all sorts of problems in the breaking of the food chain. We're going to have situations leading to global famine if we don't come up with an overall strategy of utilizing a whole new approach to food production, making use of other areas of the world as a type of breadbasket, and using new transportation techniques for moving people as well as foodstuffs to critical areas.
And we've been a long-time supporter of the hydrogen energy technology, and I know many people don't like it, but they feel that there's not sufficient research, but there really is if you don't go and do the research, that people are now putting water in their car and running their cars off of water. This is not an unusual thing. This is being done by scientists in Japan, scientists in the U.S., and scientists in Europe. So,
but how does water relate to hydrogen, Desiree?
They run their buses in Perth off of water.
Desiree is referring to other methods of breaking down water to produce hydrogen.
Right. It doesn't take much of an electric charge there to actually break down the water right in your car and produce the fuel. So, and with lighter cars, we can also produce more, better technology. So there's so much to be done, and people are already doing it. It's just a matter of utilizing the change. We were just in Europe, and many cars in Europe are running off of natural gas and getting it actually for about half the price of what we were paying for gasoline several months ago.
But I do believe in less than 5 years we're going to have a new energy source, which will be using gases and solids to go beyond carbon and come up with a new type of energy stream that will be revolutionary, that will really put to rest our dependence upon carbon and, shall we say, oil as the major energy source. We're moving very, very quickly in terms of energy alternatives, and I just wanted to caution the audience that is looking to zero-point energy, which may be a little too distant right now to see in its practical application. There are leading chemists and physicists that I know of that are now working on new energy applications, one of which can be traced to the Keys of Enoch.
And the Keys talk about electromagnetic energy, and this is some of the top research going on of creating these electromagnetic motors based on the magnetism of the air and the energy around us.
See, that's one thing. It's hard for me to understand why our government keeps denying that there is a global warming. They keep denying all these things are happening. And it's so obvious.
Well, the governments of the world, especially as Dr. Hurtak mentioned, the United Nations has really affirmed from their Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that there is global warming. But I think one has to also look, and this is where some of the other scientists come in, and I'm sure you're familiar as well, that, the whole planet and the solar system is taking on a new energy, and so it's hard to determine how much is the greenhouse gases and how much is the planetary change or galactic change or solar change that's taking place. But I think, if we can do our part, even 10 or 20% to solve the greenhouse gas emission problem, I think we can help this planet go through less of a severe change than what may be in store for us.
Until the Intergovernmental Panel report was released in the last year, 2007, it was basically a scientific debate whether or not we were having temperature increases that were inconsistent with historic rhythms, that when we go back over 650,000 years and see in terms of carbon emissions in the ice cores that are being brought up from beneath really the oceans and in the Antarctic region, we recognize that there is something truly that is taking place now that is beyond the boundaries of traditional paradigms. And on the other hand, governments do have responsibilities not to get people into an area of excitement where they will freak out or go into sociological panic. I think it's important to recognize that we have a need for positive thinking, a positive future. We believe through the Academy that there always will be a future. There always will be science that will give us answers as we balance the scientific with the spiritual. And to the end, we are dedicated to finding countermeasures, both for water purification, desalinization, working with non-fossil fuel energy sources. So for those who can think and, pardon the expression, metaphorically speaking, breathe underwater momentarily, there are those positive situations we believe that will take place in this coming decade.
And Dolores, that's the essence of the Keys of Enoch, that we're not alone. We're not going through this alone, that there is actually a higher program, and that's why this information is being given. For instance, we knew a person who lived in the house that Albert Einstein used to live in, and Einstein used to go up and meditate every morning, and we believe that some of his information actually came from these higher sources of intelligence. And
yeah,
people,
that's what I've heard, that he was in contact, too, because he was way ahead of his time. And
whether he was conscious of it or not conscious of it, he actually did seek out kind of a higher God consciousness to help him in his quest and his questions. And I believe that this is also available to everyone. And scientists are starting to get this information, starting to tune into the greater consciousness mind, if one wants to call it, or the information flowing from higher intelligence to this planet who are really here to help us. So the important thing, I think, for the audience is to know we are really not alone, that we are being watched, that higher intelligence is helping us in this transition.
Yeah, they're also helping us as we go into this new higher dimension and the changing of the vibrations and the frequencies.
Well, this is why I think that the French and the British and the other governments of the world are coming out with so much information, where you have leading members both in aerospace programs as well as airline pilots, who have great reputations, as well as experts in remote viewing and sensing technology, who have come forth and say, essentially, our best experts over 60 years, in some instances over 65 years, have a database of information showing in thousands and thousands of cases there is a situation of positive encounters that clearly outweigh the negative encounters. We're a situation where we have to use a good selective factor to work with those forms of higher intelligence that respect us as a species and are willing to engage us with space law and science that will enhance the human race rather than retard us. That inner question still has to be debated in global commons at the UN, in higher circles in the United States, to come up with really clear conclusions. But we are at a lip, I believe, of seeing more and more information that will be disclosed, showing that we clearly have counterparts in the universe that wish as well as we go through the quagmire of being here on little planet Earth, suddenly being positioned to either get inundated by all sorts of unfortunate mechanisms of Mother Nature kicking back at us, or simply realizing that we will not go down the tubes with non-biodegradable soap, that there's more to life than simply being here and seeing everything awash. We are here as living, intelligent, spiritual beings of universal intelligence. We are part of a divine creation. We are part of a mind that's just waking up to its cosmic attunement. We have, to use the figures of speech of the early Coptic Christians, a Christed nature, which means we can think and work with greater miracles than the Scriptures tell us about symbolically, and if we do this collectively, we can transform Mother Earth momentarily for higher worlds of intelligence to reach through to us, as happened in my experience, where I was praying, and in a higher state of consciousness, the light manifested itself. The divine angelic presence was there. Higher science was there that's now being proved 35 years later. Specifically, we are being given a plan of reconciliation, redemption, and reprogramming if we are humble enough to accept this and not simply sign away all of our rights to the intellectuals in their ivory towers.
Yeah, because, I have 20 years of working with the ETs and UFO investigations, and I've come to the conclusion they're very positive, and I know there are reasons they're here, so I don't have any fear of them. But, a lot of the other investigators don't agree with me, and they're into the negativity.
Well, we feel that there's actually both. Of course, it's just like us. We say, like on planet Earth, you have some really great people. In fact, everyone's great when you really get down to it. But you have to be cautious about some of them, just to know where they're coming from. But for the most part, we're working, and we feel everyone should be working with those that are really here to help us. And there are plenty of those intelligences, and they're both extraterrestrial and what we also call ultra-terrestrial, and some people call them celestials.
Yeah, the ones
extracelestials.
Yeah.
And I like that terminology because it explains something far beyond the extraterrestrial. And I believe that as we go into this coming change in late 2008, early 2009, we're going to see more of a heavenly display of other life forms. And it's going to bring to the human drama throughout the world the desire really to develop a concrete space policy, a space law that will help us reach out through a new generation of experts that can say, no big thing, we know there are other life forms in the cosmos. Let us get on with the next phase of evolution, but let us work with those who respect our identity, our Christ nature, our Buddha-like nature of self-realization, and work with those life forms that can indeed enhance us and give us the spiritual direction we need.
It's because the main thing they're here to make sure that we don't destroy the earth. They want the human race to continue. And that's very important. That's why a lot of people are going to have to just come to the conclusion there are other beings out there, and the UFOs are real, but it is just another life form. That's what I've found. Another body that the soul can go into to learn lessons and inhabit.
Well, in some cases we feel that there are cosmic cousins, because I believe when we go out into space, we're going to find other life forms that don't look like us, but we're going to find a lot of them that do. And that, of course, means that we also didn't evolve on this earth, that either we have a divine blueprint that came in from a much higher source, or that at least that we were part of a vast intelligence throughout the universe and maybe just got stuck here for too long and we don't remember where we came from.
Yeah, but there are also many other life forms. I've found that in my work. They can look like things that you would not possibly think could be alive. That's why we have to realize there was consciousness in absolutely everything.
Well, this is what the great Church Father Origen believed. He believed that even stones had souls. And we recognize through panspermia what the Greeks thought, the life in its seed form scattered throughout the universe. There would obviously be other life forms that would be different than us in appearance, but would have, as it were, the same Godhead, or recognize that there would be a cosmic law of respect and association that would have to be followed. Otherwise, there would be simply chaos upon chaos, rather than the fine, subtle layering and mathematical patterning of creation as it goes through its entropy into a whole new type of reorganization. So consciousness can throw off entropy or a dissipation and destruction of life is what higher intelligence has, whether we call it the ultra-terrestrial or the extracelestial. These are life forms that have gone beyond the life and death state, and they're reaching out to us now with the idea that if we begin to use our sensory mechanisms and our inner spiritual powers to reach out and to help humanity, then we can collectively rebalance this whole craziness to move to chaos, to destruction, to polarity that sees only the solutions from a negative standpoint of an apocalyptic infall rather than an apocalyptic transformation. So this is a great challenge that reaches out to us, whether we see this historically from the ancient scriptures in the Near East, what I believe is the importance of the Coptic documents, the lost teachings of the Christ figure, or whether we reach it through the teachings of the great scriptures of North India, whether we look at the Chinese oracle bones, we recognize that there's a whole wisdom tradition that is alive and well if we look deeper and recognize that we're just, one of many forms in the schoolhouse of Mother Earth that have to realize our lessons here are to love one another unconditionally, to understand that the whole process of life is to learn the dynamic of the evolution of Godhood that is within us, and as we create and as we recreate, we advance the planes of spirit, or the opening of the energy levels, the mystics would call the chakras of the seven seals, to that point of higher light resonance through which we can actually graduate into the universe that is the university of the universe.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to have to I'm watching the clock. You realize we've already talked almost an hour. They'll have to stop around 5 till, or they'll pull the plug. But,
well, we thank you for this opportunity to speak.
But do you have anything next Friday?
Yes, we're going out of the country, unfortunately, for the next month, but I'm sure we'll do it again, and we're also in Missouri sometime, so as we said, we'll come over and visit you sometime down there in Arkansas. Appreciate all the great work that you've done over the years.
And we're willing to open always the doorhouses to this greater university of the universe, the university without walls. The Christ figure calls the house of many mansions, the Hakdomo Tekaloth. And in this great design, let us be blessed together.
I was thinking if we had more time, we could go into the other books dealing with those things. But
we'll find that opportunity in the future. We bless you so much for having us aboard. And the Library of the Ancients is alive and well, and the keys of Enoch provide these keys to the higher dimensional doors that are also alive and well. So we ask you to keep up your great work, and all of the friends out there, keep your eyes open ad astra to the stars with blessed assurance that the divine does exist and that we as humans will make it through this difficult stage of history.
All right, before we go, will you give them again a way they can contact you or a way they can get to your website?
Right, we have two main websites. One is called futurescience.org, and the other one is keysofenoch.org. And we have lots of music, lots of DVDs, and, of course, various books that explain the same cosmology of the Keys of Enoch. And we feel that we really are getting into that time where people, whether it's the economic cycles or the environmental cycles, really need to have an understanding of who we are, why we're here, and what we can do as a humanity to put out our energies in love and divine healing.
And all of those who have the Keys of Enoch out there in Radio Land, please come aboard with the new music we have. The Living Capstone, we have music called Sanctus, and we have groups around the country that can help you with this great orchestration of music that has inspired so many great musicians like Ellis Coltrane, Carlos Santana, Gilberto Gil throughout the world. We have many leading musicians utilizing the sacred names of God encoded in the keys. So God bless all of you and keep your happy and your higher state of consciousness alive, and in the sense of the age of miracles, continue those daily miracles.
Okay. And Dr. Hurtak and Desiree have the Academy of Future Science. And you said they can contact your website and they can email you or check in on the books.
Right, yeah. There's an 800
And I want to thank you. It's been an honor to have you on tonight.
God bless again to all. Keep up our wonderful work together.
Maybe we'll do it again in the future then.
Thank you.
I'm going out of the country too. Okay, now have a safe journey, and thanks for coming on tonight. And I want to say good night to everybody out there that's listening. Okay.
If you enjoyed the show, check out more of our other videos and be sure to subscribe and click the like button. Thank you for listening to the Metaphysical Hour with Dolores Cannon.